Is there anything that Doug Casey fears? We're about to find out today. Joining me on the sidelines of the Silver and Gold Summit here in San Francisco, Doug Casey.
Nice to be with you, as always, Daniela.
I asked this question, I put it out there because you don't strike me as someone that fears much. So if there is something that scares you, I feel I really should be in hiding from it.
Well, I think, as I've thought for a long time, that we're heading for a disaster of genuinely historic proportions. Now, I may be the wrong person to ask because the first thing I wanted to be when I was a kid was a paleontologist. So that being the case, I'm tempted to look at things from a perspective of hundreds of millions of years, but bringing it up to the shorter term, the U.S. has been going downhill since about 1913, and the drop downhill has accelerated and gone parabolic in recent years. So I think we're almost on the cusp of a civil war. And the only thing that makes me think, no, that's not going to happen, is because the average American is so apathetic and overweight and drugged up that it's unlikely that he's going to venture away from his video games and go and riot in the streets. But it's an ugly situation where these people just hate each other.
Has there been another time in U.S. history where you feel there's been this much hate, this much divide? How far back would we have to go?
Well, I lived during the 1960s. It was a wonderful time to be alive in many ways. I mean, the Rolling Stones came out with my favorite song, Street Fighting Man, for a good reason. There were lots of riots and 1,000 bombings in the early 70s. People have forgotten about this. But that was different. This is like wholesale. The public wasn't involved in those days. It was just little fringe elements that were, this is different.
You correctly predicted many things, Doug, including Trump winning the presidency. The midterms are right around the corner. Any feeling, sentiment as to how this is going to play out?
I really don't know this time around who's going to win, but what I do feel pretty confident about is, although Trump is doing some intelligent things, he's actually, in point of fact, cut a lot of regulations, gotten rid of a number of bad apples in the U.S. government. The U.S. government's full of bad apples. That's not hard to do. But the trade war he's starting with China could have disastrous consequences. And if the economy and the stock market turn down in earnest while he's in office, he's going to be blamed for it. And since, for some reason, inaccurately, he's associated with the free market, capitalism again will be blamed, such as happened back in the 1930s, and we'll get an ultra-leftist, of which there are lots in office. You know, Pocahontas and Bernie and, you know, all these lunatics in the Democratic Party. One of them will be president, and then the fun really starts.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Some people feel that they have a star in hiding that they're about to unveil. I mean, the Democratic Party here is really in shambles, Doug.
Well, and a pox upon them. That's good. It's a cesspool that ought to be drained, but instead it's full to overflowing. And I don't think it's going to get better. And the argument that I make for things not getting better, it's not just a cyclical thing. It's that for many years, it's been a meme that all kids have to go to college. I've always disagreed with that for many reasons. But the problem is that the educational system of the U.S., high schools, grade schools, but absolutely universities and colleges, is totally captured by leftist intellectuals, neo-Marxists, horrible people with disastrous ideas. And these kids go into college from high school, and their heads are filled with all kinds of poisonous ideas by people in authority. And it's really hard to unlearn something once you've learned it, even if you later find out that it's wrong. So I don't know how things are going to get better. The battle is kind of lost. I'm not even worried about the markets, which should be ugly. I'm worried about the collapse of Western civilization itself.
You've been saying that for
Yes,
a long time now.
because all of the values that made the West what it is, freedom of speech, capitalism, privacy, personal liberty, so many things. These things are held in disrepute by the public at large. I don't know how you.
Do you just want to throw your hands in the air?
Well, I don't want to be too adversely affected by it, but look, the world is going to go on because of two things. Number one, the average person's like a squirrel. He understands, even if he knows nothing about economics, I've got to put some nuts aside for the winter. So he tends to try to produce more than he consumes and save the difference. Very important. Second thing is technology. All of technology, not just computers, is working like Moore's law, compounding upon itself. And that's going to continue too. But there are reasons why both of those trends could actually stop too. I hate to sound too gloomy, because I'm not a gloomy person, but when I think about these things, and you ask me that question, I'm giving you an answer that just seems reasonable and logical.